What if the roles of the strongest were completely reversed? And not only was Gojo Satoru the victor of the great battle in Shinjuku, but what if he was actually the villain the remaining sorcerers had to best instead of Sukuna? In this video, I want to place the Six Eyes and Limitless, the sorcerer who shook the balance of the earth just by being born, Satoru Gojo, up against what I've appropriately dubbed in other videos the Anti Sukuna Squad. Everything will remain the same with their plan, starting with Kashimo and moving all the way up until where we are in the series, or at least until Gojo meets his end. Hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more content like this in your feed, and most importantly, thank you for watching. For a clarification at the beginning, Gojo will be handicapped with the exact same ailments as the King of Curses in the Shinjuku Showdown. After the major fight between the strongest, Gojo would also be nerfed for the rest of this fight with slow reverse curse technique, low curse energy output, and absolutely no access to his domain expansion, Unlimited Void. This not only makes the playing field between sorcerers much more even, similarly to the canon events of the Shinjuku Showdown, the final boss will be unable to just one-shot the entire squad at once using their domain, while Gojo's Limitless will still be in effect, and his blue and red techniques, although reduced in effectiveness, will still be strong threats. The remaining sorcerers will definitely still have a lot of trouble to deal with. Interestingly enough, their plan would have to change very little, despite the opponent being completely different. Saving Megami's soul inside of Gojo's vessel is a non-factor now, so they only have to focus on victory. Let's start this final battle from the very beginning, since if we are completely reversing roles, Kashimo is still, no doubt, charging into battle before anyone else. Again, since Gojo is now taking the spot of the enemy Kashimo transcended time to face, Mythical Beast Amber would be brought into the equation of their power scaling. Gojo, not really having a Heian Era form, for all intents and purposes, would begin the battle in his previously discussed state. And with Kashimo being willing to forsake his life for this one chance of a real battle, just as he does against Sukuna, Kashimo immediately releases his curse technique. Gojo, thanks to still having access to the Limitless, even without full output, is still going to be at an overall advantage against the reincarnated sorcerer. Kashimo's speed stats, attack power, and durability are all impeccable, and at the very most just below, if not equal to Gojo. There are multiple instances in the fight between Hikari and Kashimo that depict Hikari having enough reaction time to acknowledge and change the location of where a lightning bolt strikes, and Kashimo follows this action up by being able to keep up with the gambler in speed. And as for combat experience, Kashimo was depicted even outside of using his curse technique to be able to keep up with a fully jackpotted Hikari, flaunting a durability that shows little to no harm from any of Hikari's attacks besides external cosmetic damage. Although Kashimo admits he needed to use his maximum output of curse energy to properly defend against Hikari's attacks, the reincarnated sorcerer would have been able to fight for even longer if he wasn't knocked into water by the gambler, which still proves impressive endurance. With the ability to shoot lightning bolts after marking objects with positive and negative energy, Kashimo, without putting techniques on the table, is more than capable of keeping up with the Honored One, able to substitute any non-contact marks with his rod if he can set things up in the correct direction. Gojo Satoru, who's a very impressive fighter himself, I don't need to tell you that, throughout the Sukuna fight depicted immense experience in almost every aspect of sorcery. Satoru Gojo was adept at simple domain, Falling Blossom Emotion, Reverse Curse Technique, and is more than capable of mixing all of this into his close quarters combat. No other warrior, in my opinion, would be able to survive a direct encounter with Malevolent Shrine, heal themselves at the rate of the slash attacks, meanwhile duking it out with the King of Curses himself physically during their escape attempt. And against all those insane odds, Gojo was still able to overcome, which alone speaks towards Gojo's level of aptitude. And although no matter who you're rooting for currently or typing a comment about who I'm wrong about, even if we take just regular hand-to-hand out of the match between the two, when it just comes down to techniques, Gojo is definitely superior. Red is a powerful energy blast using the positive side of Limitless, shown to blast enemies through multiple walls with high amounts of force. And blue, the negative aspect, has also been capable of demolishing most of Jujutsu Tech's buildings and floor even when Gojo was a teenager. And the blue ability also gives Gojo access to high-speed movement and warping that is mentioned by Kenjaku to be like hitting a person with a Mack truck if caught in the crossfire. Gojo even theorized Sukuna was being conservative with Mahoraga usage, in fear Gojo might delete the Shikigami in one quick attack. Most likely this would be the cause of Unlimited Void or Hollow Purple, Gojo's ultimate attack that, although requiring charge time or haphazard creation steps, at its maximum 200% power, the attack was shown to be able to eliminate entire city blocks. Ultimately, Gojo has more than enough power to defeat Kashimo in just pure striking strength with Black Flash or Red. Gojo has the speed to keep up with Kashimo's attacks in close quarters and long range, whether it be just by his normal speed or Gojo's blue warp, and the plain shield of the Limitless just makes Gojo's durability not even a factor because Kashimo can't hit him. Mythical Beast Amber, although an extremely powerful curse technique, would no doubt massively improve Kashimo's already high stats. In fact, it's confirmed it does just this by amplifying the electrical signals in Kashimo's brain, improving his motor functions by converting his entire body into electricity or cursed energy, depending on your interpretation. While Kashimo may be able to overwhelm Gojo unexpectedly at first, just as Kashimo does against Sukuna, Gojo's Limitless would present a solid defense against all of Kashimo's lightning attacks. And despite having access to literally all phenomenon regarding electricity, Kashimo's sound waves, lightning bolts, explosions, and even fully charged, potentially nuclear-level laser beams will all never reach Gojo. It would certainly be a battle for the ages, but if Kashimo performs just as he did against Ryomen Sukuna, it's most likely Kashimo will fall just the same. Except instead of being diced to pieces, he'll be turned to dust by the marching terror that is the Hollow Purple attack. Whether that just be something that happens over time after Gojo manages to outsmart Kashimo, or it happens right off the bat in the fight for Kashimo just underestimating Gojo. However, that's only if Kashimo performs as he did against Sukuna. Stick with me here. I just said if Gojo outsmarts Kashimo, and while I do think that's possible, I don't think it's something easy per se. In Hikari vs Kashimo, we've not only seen an insane resolve in the Thunder God, but a natural tactfulness and ability to use their environment and understanding of electricity to Kashimo's best possible benefit. One fact that can't be ignored in this alternate reality is Kashimo would still have 1 full month to learn, analyze, and prepare against Gojo Satoru. By learning about Gojo through Jujutsu High's knowledge and general idea of his curse technique, he would have plenty of time to plan a counterattack. And the more than intelligent Kashimo could definitely create a win condition, and that would involve the phenomena of ultraviolet light. Ultraviolet light is electromagnetic radiation at wavelengths of 10 to 400 nanometers, shorter than that of visible light, but longer than X-rays. You can find this in tanning lamps, black lights, and is even naturally produced by the sun. More importantly, it's something, by using the definition of Mythical Beast Amber, Kashimo should be more than capable of not only controlling, but conjuring. And why all of that matters is simple. Gojo's neutral Limitless manipulates space mathematically in order to create a space where the distance infinitely grows the closer you get. However, even as far back as Gojo developing his auto defense mechanics for the Limitless, Gojo admits he can really only control threats to an atomic level. While there are particles Gojo may be able to specify on, things of the subatomic particle are pretty much able to flow freely through the Limitless. This is what obviously allows things like oxygen to enter Gojo's lungs, light to touch Gojo's skin, warm and cold air, etc. But notice how I just mentioned light touching Gojo? Specifically, light that, depending on how concentrated, intense, or how long you are exposed to it, can cause radiation in the human body. The same kind of radiation Kashimo is known to have control over. The same kind of radiation Kashimo can use to cause an electrical explosion. In Kashimo's short scuffle with Sukuna, he does show an ability that allows him to reach his hand out, irradiate the ground, and once Kashimo's hand closes, the surrounding area is quote-unquote vaporized, causing an explosion. Even Kashimo, without the natural amplification of his curse technique, was able to completely blast a hole through Hikari's chest. Or, where I'm ultimately trying to drive my point home to, electrify and ignite Hikari's, or in this specific case, Gojo's brain. Keeping Gojo's warping, speed, and just plain old natural reflexes, and especially the 6 eyes in mind, he would already be informed of what Kashimo's abilities involve, so direct light beam probably wouldn't work immediately. The Thunder God would most likely have to conjure a large flash of UV light enveloping the entire Shinjuku area, and if Gojo is already out in the open, it's possible this is an unavoidable attack, in which case Gojo would be marked and essentially a ticking time bomb for Kashimo to dispose of at any point he chooses. Now, you can argue that this isn't possible and is just headcanon because Kashimo didn't do anything like this in the series, which I say is fair. This is a completely headcanon result for a fight, just going off of what Kashimo should be able to do, as opposed to what he actually did. So if you choose to believe I'm wasting your time here, that's fine. I'm gonna have Gojo move on anyway, because this scenario is just very niche. Kashimo would not only have to pull this before Gojo defeated him naturally, Kashimo would have to hope the explosion actually killed the Honored One. If Gojo is able to produce the same healing block as Akari did by regenerating his brain before it gets completely blown up, it may not be a one-hit kill. And considering Gojo has already been shown to have experience with brain meddling, this isn't out of left field to assume, although Arame does confirm Akari has better regeneration than Gojo. Either way, it's a one and done moment. If it doesn't work, Gojo wins. And in literally any other scenario other than this one, Gojo beats Kashimo. Meanwhile, Hikari and Arame, who in this alternate timeline is the captain of the Gojo fan club, fight in the background. As Gojo sends Kashimo to the Shadow Realm for a long-deserved rest, the start of the Anti-Gojo Squad's assault would rain down on the Honored One. Itadori Yuji and Higuruma Hiromi would descend and get ready to try and trap Gojo in Deadly Sentencing, hoping they're going to be able to confiscate Limitless entirely and remove Gojo's largest advantage over them. Similarly to Dismantle or Cleave, the Limitless poses the largest threat to the entire protagonist group. Although a Shikigami, like Maharaga, may have had to adapt to each individual aspect of the Limitless to defeat it, if Higuruma is able to effectively remove the technique from Gojo's arsenal entirely, that's red, blue, purple, and even the neutral infinity of the Limitless, all gone in one single swoop. Confiscation would present them with a fight against Gojo, who only has access to the 6 eyes and his innate sorcerer/fighting talent. And while that's still a pretty serious threat, with a good old Jujutsu jumping, it may be an overcomeable one. While Higuruma catching Gojo off guard with his domain might be a little harder, Itadori Yuji being sent in as a distraction still tracks with the overall plan to confiscate Gojo. As I'm sure many of you asked yourselves, what the hell would Gojo even be held accountable for? A possibility is laid out in the heavy info dump we get from Higuruma, who explains how Judgeman selects a person's crime and determines their punishment. Because Judgeman is an unbiased Shikigami, it not only judges fairly, but chooses crimes at random. A murderer could get lucky and have the crime they're charged with just be petty theft, while a mostly innocent person could get the death penalty for something bad they did in their past. Higuruma Hiromi is a very inexperienced sorcerer. Even though he has a very useful technique, being sent into battle alone against Gojo is not likely to end well, and the only reason the protagonist crew was able to send Yuji out in the first place was because anyone caught in Higuruma's domain may mess up the trial and also get inadvertently charged. And more importantly, the original plan was always to tie Yuji into the domain expansion and continue the previously discussed trial in Higuruma and Yuji's last fight, the trial concerning the massacre at Shibuya. By continuing an existing trial, Higuruma no longer had to put the crime Sukuna was held for to chance. And this is the exact reason I still think Itadori should go out onto the battlefield with Higuruma against Gojo, as not only would Itadori, someone who's more than familiar with sparring Gojo, be able to distract the Honored One long enough for Higuruma to get a domain off, for all intents and purposes, with some weaselly lawyering and technicality, something tells me they might be able to pin the entire massacre on Gojo's hands. Because, you know, he was the one who fought so hard to stop Yuji's execution in the first place. Is that a bit of a stretch? Maybe. But it's not up to me. It's up to Judgeman. And in this alternate universe, I think Judgeman would be more than happy to slam down the gavel of justice on Gojo, indirectly allowing Sukuna to cause so much chaos. Now, not only will they be able to assure a proper crime to try Gojo for, they can no doubt at least gain a confiscation on these charges. Death penalty is also an option I'd love to discuss, but let's put a pin in that for now. Most importantly, we have to specify how exactly confiscation would interact with Gojo. From how we understand the ability to work, if a person has a curse tool with a technique imbued into it, that will be removed first. If there's no tool, Judgman moves down the list and confiscates the user's curse technique. When the ability was used on Yuji, it actually removed his curse energy entirely because, he has no technique. Higuruma notes that most, if not all, sorcerers experience curse energy disruption regardless if the technique is removed, as usually it messes up with ingrained habits and naturally occurring energy flows anyway. While Satoru Gojo, the strongest sorcerer of the modern era, strikes me as someone who would still be effectively in control of their cursed energy, it can't be denied how much further Gojo is pushed down the totem pole without Limitless. To clarify, the Six Eyes is not a curse technique, but an inherited genetic mutation of the Gojo clan, so it could never be up for confiscation. It is a part of Gojo's body, and is even fully active when his curse energy levels are at 0. The Six Eyes also has a natural phenomenon of supplying its user with excellent mastery over their curse energy. So I think if Gojo held on to them, it makes sense why he retained his energy manipulation and sorcerer abilities. While Gojo would still be significantly nerfed without Limitless and reduced to basically a Yuji Todo clone, the Six Eyes would still elevate the Honored One to a much higher plane with unnatural reflexes and basically still a 360-degree long-range field of sight. Any minor curse energy fluctuation or unknown circumstance becomes known to Gojo, within reason. After the domain expansion ends and all the remaining sorcerers reveal themselves jumping into the fray, let's discuss things from Gojo's perspective for a little bit. Satoru Gojo has just nearly exhausted himself to the point of completion after battling the strongest sorcerer of the past. Now reset to 100% health, with only slight restrictions on domain and reverse curse technique, Gojo's Limitless, his main aspect of sorcery, was now just confiscated with no hope of it returning, down to just his physical abilities, cursed energy control, and barrier techniques. Gojo has no choice but to rely on the basics and hope the Six Eyes will provide him the extra sensory required to maintain a fight with 6 grade 1 level opponents. Gojo no longer has the means to easily defend himself and needs to start relying on dodging or blocking with his hands and energy. Gojo has been shown to be able to create after images with his speed, something not even Yuji is able to accomplish. And Gojo's attack power would be significantly reduced without access to red or blue, drastically decreasing his striking strength, as his punches would no longer be able to call upon blue to add the pulling effect towards his incoming fist, meaning all of Gojo's physical attacks are now lowered to the power he can produce off of his own stats and energy reinforcement. The good news is, Gojo is supremely durable still, and thanks to the Six Eyes, even without the Limitless, he still has infinite stamina. His reverse curse technique, though slow, keeps him in the fight if only minor injuries occur, and his reflexes are still adept enough to dodge most supremely powerful attacks that may come Gojo's way, unless he's caught off guard, of course. And he still outstats everyone in the incoming assault, except maybe Maki, but we'll get into that when she shows up. Let's instead get into how Satoru Gojo would interact with each individual member of this anti-Gojo squad. Higuruma Hiromi, who for all intents and purposes is the biggest issue at present for Gojo, if he's able to produce the death penalty for the Honored One, of course, as unfortunately, even if Higuruma gets pressed to unlock domain amplification and reverse curse technique as he does against Sukuna, there's not a chance in hell the lawyer would be able to last longer than a minute with Gojo in the ring. Higuruma did impressively keep up with Itadori Yuji, who's also a serious powerhouse in his own right, and if the lawyer is carrying Sword of Execution, he's definitely more of a threat. Just one graze of the blade meaning death with no exception. However, the Six Eyes aids Gojo's know-how to avoid the Sword of Light entirely most likely, and he'll stay away from it. frankly because Gojo can easily overwhelm Higuruma in speed and attack power. Similarly to how he performs against Sukuna, it's doubtful Higuruma could 1v1 the Honored One even with the instant win condition involved. Gojo's just too experienced and obviously more of a threat than Yuji, and it must be mentioned when Higuruma was pressing Yuji in their fight, Yuji had no cursed energy to reinforce his strikes with. I doubt whether the plan is against Sukuna or Gojo it would change much, as all the other sorcerers involved would probably still do their best to keep Higuruma safe and set up the best way for Sword of Execution to land. It is the quickest way to the anti-Gojo squad's victory, but because of the 6 eyes, Higuruma is also going to be Gojo's main priority because of the threat. Unlike Sukuna though, Gojo will be without any projectile attacks, meaning Higuruma does have more of a chance to survive, as Gojo will only be able to dish out kill shots with his bare hands. Not saying Gojo isn't capable of doing that, but it's definitely just more of a direct approach than long-range dismantle. And the proud few who would be deployed to protect Higuruma would be as follows. Choso, eldest death painting and older brother of Itadori Yuji, primarily known for his exceptional mastery of the blood manipulation curse technique, and thanks to his hybrid nature, Choso can conjure blood from his curse energy, similar to how the disaster curses create their elements. His blood also carries intense poison that can stifle a sorcerer's healing if entering a human's bloodstream. Choso is fairly strong and was even able to force Kenjaku, a 1,000-year-old anomaly with multiple techniques to show their hand. But to be fair, the latter was easily able to defeat Choso when effort was required, and had Yuki Tsukumo not interrupted their battle, Kenjaku most likely would have won. Choso was also only able to fight a Shibuya incident Itadori before his fight with Mahito on near equal ground, and self-admittedly suffered critical damage from only 3 of Yuji's blows. Gojo exhibits a much larger threat than both Itadori and Kenjaku combined, and while piercing blood can cause huge damage if it strikes Gojo, his 6 eyes would most likely give him the reflexes to dodge it, regardless of the direction it comes from. Even Kenjaku is shown to be able to move out of the way of its point-blank attack. The 6 eyes would probably also inform Gojo of the poisonous side of Choso's blood as well, making him even more cautious to not get hit by it. Supernova is a pretty good attack that, if paired with other sorcerers' support or catching Gojo off guard, could present a pretty hard blow to avoid. However, it is possible Gojo could dampen damage, or at the very least, keep the poison out of his bloodstream by using domain amplification, similar to how Kusakabe or Higuruma use it to endure Sukuna's slash attacks. Speaking of Kusakabe, here's another character that would make it his best interest to keep Higuruma safe, considering he would rather not be jumping in to fight Gojo. Supposedly the strongest grade 1, not including the 3 great clans, Kusakabe gets that title not because of some hack's curse technique, but his immense utility. A master swordsman and close quarters combatant, even able to launch threats like Sukuna across the city with their kicks, Kusakabe's expert use of simple domain and the new shadow style go hand in hand with Kusakabe's melee level. Not only able to speedily cut any attack that comes into his range, but Kusakabe can even expand his range to reach his opponent and open them up to countless slashes now that they're in his grasp. However, Gojo, although admitting his simple domain isn't nearly as advanced as Kusakabe's, is still pretty adept at his own version of it, and he does have access to the technique Falling Blossom Emotion, which is ironically perfect for countering the sword slashes Kusakabe would be sending from his own attack. Gojo, even if taking a couple hits here and there, could just reinforce his durability with cursed energy, while deflecting with Falling Blossom Emotion just to get up and personal. The Honored One has the reaction time, power, and counter to eliminate Kusakabe no problem. And the 6 eyes would let Gojo calculate Kusakabe's maximum domain range and avoid it entirely if he wanted to. Ino Takuma is next, and I mean, what do you really want me to say about Ino? Nanami's curse tool is sure a great addition to his arsenal, and the Auspicious Beasts are awesome backup to a mostly physical fighting sorcerer, but you just can't convince me there's a single thing this man is doing against Gojo, limitless or no limitless. While Kaichi provides a strong projectile attack, Raiki gives Ino better fluid movement like water, and supposedly no one has survived Ryu. All of this mediocre sorcery in the face of Gojo's overwhelming combat experience in every category: speed, attack, durability, reflexes, Ino realistically just stands no chance and is really better off staying in the background for support. And last would leave Itadori Yuji, most likely the strongest piece on the protagonist side of the chessboard at this moment. With Yuji's significantly boosted attack strength in regards to mastering his soul disruption, as well as now having access to reverse curse technique and potentially blood manipulation, the already tank of a physical fighter is now adding much more metaphysical sorcerer aspects to his combat, which no doubt give Yuji a much greater edge against Gojo with no limitless than really anyone else here. However, again, Yuji really is young and inexperienced to take on an Honored One level sorcerer at this time. Just how Itadori was tossed around by Sukuna in Shinjuku, who was not even the least bit impressed by Yuji's buffs. And although I think Yuji's development has been awesome, it's realistic to say even the best fighter in this party can't beat Gojo in a match of hands. Obviously, if we're to consider each one of these sorcerers going one by one, it's very impossible to imagine any of them overcoming Gojo. He's been the strongest sorcerer of the modern age for his whole life, not only because he was luckily bestowed the gift of the limitless, but because almost every single fundamental aspect of sorcery comes naturally to him. It's almost as if Gojo was born for this, born to be the strongest. Everything he tries, he masters without fail. The man has ungodly talent in battle, and all the cursed energy to back it up with thanks to the 6 eyes. If every single one of these sorcerers were to attack Gojo at once, it's possible they could catch him off guard with an attack or two. It would also probably be in their best interest, considering the longer the fight goes, the more chance Gojo has to regain power. Just like Sukuna, if Gojo was to hit a Black Flash on anybody, even once, he would most likely immediately start accelerating his regeneration, and after enough time, may even regain domain expansion. Just like Sukuna, the final battle against Gojo will be a race against time to the kill shot. Mei-Mei's Bird Strike may get to test its usage against Gojo without infinite space between him and it. A well-placed Piercing Blood could stab the brain, or a Kut 7-3 and Soul Blast could really rupture some organs. 6 sorcerers, including Mei-Mei from afar, all fighting to gain supremacy over the Honored One, is a tough situation to imagine anyone overcoming, especially when you consider the strong team undertaking the assault. However, the thing about Gojo, unlike any old strong sorcerer, unlike any other special grade even, remove Geto's, Yuki's, or even Yuta's technique, none of them would be as capable as Satoru Gojo, especially with his 6 eyes. 360-degree perfect vision over amazing lengths of space, with the extra sensory to give the perfect reflexes and knowledge on his opponent's strengths and weaknesses. Why, where, and how to handle all of the opponents and juggle their attacks without taking any serious damage. Even if his RCT is slow, it would just be enough to regenerate any injuries he may take. As we do know, Okotsu Yuta is off killing Kenjaku, unfortunately not arriving in Shinjuku until Higuruma is already dead and the protagonist squad has had its numbers dwindled. Whether you think Gojo would be able to dispatch every single sorcerer, or the combined efforts of them all are enough to get one over on him, an interesting discussion can still be had over Yuta making it and joining the fray. Because although controversial, some do claim Okotsu Yuta to be the second coming of the Honored One, possibly being one of the only to rival Gojo's pure talent in sorcery and unnatural abilities. The prodigy child Yuta is able to copy curse techniques unconditionally and twist the one closest to him with the curse of love into a special grade Shikigami that he carries with him to this day. If Gojo was to survive up until this point, before we get into how Yuta's domain would function against Gojo, how does the Honored One losing Limitless affect just a regular fight between the 2 special grades? Okotsu Yuta is stated to be the closest to Satoru Gojo in power for 2 reasons. Yuta has almost boundless curse energy, so vast he's able to maintain high levels of endurance and durability, although Yuta does have a finite amount of curse energy, unlike the 6 eyes. Once Yuta synchronizes with Rika for 5 minutes, Yuta is also able to utilize a multitude of different techniques and tools he's acquired from all his previous battles. And while Okotsu isn't necessarily a power type, he's very proficient in close quarters combat, able to endure multiple energy blasts from the highest cursed output in history, Ishigori Ryu, whose attacks were shown capable of demolishing multiple buildings, and Yuta's catching them with his hands. Yuta traded blows with a monster like Ishigori with little effort, and when you consider Yuta's partner Rika is also able to cause entire stadium ceilings to crumble with punches, their combined attack power is pretty menacing. Even if Okotsu's speed is nowhere near comparable to after image creation like Gojo, the boy is able to fight somewhat on par with Heian Era Sukuna, showing Yuta can at least keep up. And he has Rika who can cover any of his blind spots. Fights with Yuta are always a 2v1, and Gojo was able to acknowledge Rika was a scary force of nature even when the Six Eyes had Limitless. So I have no doubt being nerfed will significantly level the playing field between these two special grades. All of the favor falls even more into Yuta's side when you consider Okotsu's technique being active would allow him to gain access to copied abilities like Thin Icebreaker that can critically damage Gojo, or extra assist abilities like Charles' Precognition or Drew's Orbital Domain. And if it really does get to that point, Domain Expansion is a great way to follow the source material and keep up with the pressure. Again, the plan is going to be to take the boss out before they start regenerating and gaining access to domains, or God forbid hit another Black Flash. So Yuta doesn't have time to give Gojo an honorable fight. No doubt the priority for Okotsu, especially if he's still feeling guilty for any lives Gojo may have taken so far, would eliminate Gojo as soon as possible with his domain. The one difference being, if Gojo was actually caught inside of Okotsu's domain expansion, Jacob's Ladder being the guaranteed hit would lose all of its viability. But Okotsu could call a pretty good audible and switch the innate technique of his domain to Sukuna's Cleave, which he copied from Rika's devouring of the final Sukuna finger. While probably not nearly as powerful as Malevolent Shrine, the slashes raining down upon Gojo in a permanent fashion would no doubt force the Honored One into simple domain, just like he did previously to survive Malevolent Shrines in the fight against Sukuna. Only this time, with low reverse curse technique, he would not be able to keep up with the assault if the simple domain fails. Whether you think Gojo's simple domain broke because it was Sukuna's Malevolent Shrine and Yuta's mimicking Cleave would just not be strong enough to do the same thing, you can still see how the odds have taken a sharp turn for Gojo just by Yuta arriving. Especially if you consider Yuji, and depending on who was taken out or not, any of the other protagonist crew jump in to help. I mean, again, with better odds, Higuruma could still be alive. Just imagine a non-limitless Gojo who has to focus on maintaining simple domain, fighting off a Yuta who's fully boosted and in his own field advantage. You've got special grade curse Rika, and all of that tied up in a bow with new Shinjuku scaled Yuji or Sword of Execution activated Higuruma. Now, Gojo's a squirrely one. It's no doubt still going to be a highly difficult fight. Yuta would be maximizing his attack power to break Gojo's natural durability. And if Yuji can help with soul damage, even without Higuruma, the three people who canonically exist in Okotsu's domain, Yuji, Yuta, and Rika, surely can achieve an amount of pressure to overwhelm Gojo's speed and reflexes, no matter how quick the Six Eyes can allow him to keep track of everything in the environment. As after excessive use of the Six Eyes, Gojo's physical body has to start lagging and creating some kind of exhaustion somewhere, from maintaining constant accuracy and precision in Sukuna's fight, going through Kashimo's onslaught, and just surviving the group battle of protagonists until Yuta shows up in the first place. The Six Eyes would have been pushed to its absolute brink. So really, in this scenario, the only counter argument I see in favor of Gojo is Yuta or Yuji not having any real killing blow potential, which I disagree with, because Yuta has a sword that's capable of chopping off Gojo's head, and Yuji could effectively wear down Gojo's soul until the physical body just gives out. And let's not forget, if Gojo's simple domain gives out for even a second in this encounter, he's gonna be smothered in cleave attacks that are conditioned to eradicate their threat and not stop attacking until nothing is left. If this opportunity gets created at any time, doused by slashes, the Honored One is perfectly pinned down for a finisher. Yuta and Yuji are more than capable of using the excess damage from the Slash Storm to close in on a winning condition, even if you have to say it requires all three of them to attack at once. Maintaining simple domain would also keep Satoru's mind fixed and make him unable to dedicate full power to any of his attacks, meaning most of his physical attacks won't do much damage anyway, making him little more than a sitting duck with no way to counter unless anybody gets close, ultimately just making this a battle of attrition against Satoru's insane feat of stamina, giving Gojo the most slack possible, even in the worst outcome for the protagonists. The reason I believe Okotsu Yuta's domain is as far as Gojo would go is Maki's sneak attack. Even if Gojo can fend off everyone somehow against every obstacle, which I mean, he is Satoru Gojo. Even after this insane amount of stalling and misdirection, I could still see him managing to come out on top. But Maki intruding the domain with her invisibility claws and piercing Gojo's heart, honestly, even better. With no need to worry about saving Megami, Maki could decapitate Gojo immediately with unhealable soul damage. Maki Zenin and her soul split katana are able to tear through Gojo's soul at a level only people like Sukuna and Yuji can understand and reach with reverse curse technique, guaranteeing there being no way out for Gojo to heal or return from this finishing blow. It may as well be as deadly to Gojo as the Sword of Execution was. And while the Six Eyes is a master at detecting cursed energy, a maximized heavenly restriction Maki is tried and confirmed to disrupt the senses of a Six Eyes user, especially when you consider he wouldn't be able to detect her outside of the domain until she entered. The Six Eyes will most likely be completely restricted to the pocket dimension of Yuta's territory, fixated intensely on all the different fighters and moving actions around him. After dragging Gojo into the fight for as long as he feels comfortable or has forgotten Maki can do this, it's possible they can take advantage of Gojo's blind spot at any point in time they feel is right. I mean, considering we're not even trying to save Megami or anything, in any case, Maki might even be able to knock Gojo's head as early as Higuruma's domain, ending Gojo while he's stifled by the no violence clause and can't even fight back, as you can make the argument Maki's null and void to that no violence factor and can throw hands against Gojo inside Deadly Sentencing. In conclusion, when it comes to the final threat of Shinjuku being Gojo Satoru instead of Ryomen Sukuna, no matter what way you look at it, the Jujutsu sorcerers remaining on the side of good should be more than capable of taking down the very messiah they themselves propped up. In fact, from this video alone, it should be clear there are multiple possibilities to defeat Satoru Gojo with this current team. Unlike Sukuna, who seems to have an answer for everything, eventually Gojo would just run out of options. Obviously, the Honored One would be able to mop the floor with most of these people if Gojo had access to unlimited void. I mean, hell, even a Gojo with Limitless would probably still kill most, if not all, of this entire roster. I'm sure there's exceptions, but I'm not getting into all of that. There's a different win condition at almost every stop if you don't agree with the first or second times Gojo could potentially lose. And honestly, if you still think Gojo should survive everything in this video and continue onwards to wherever Shinjuku Showdown is taking us, or you really just want to see Miguel and Akari pop in, maybe I'll make a part 2. Anyway guys, thank you all so much for watching. I sincerely appreciate it if you made it this far. Make sure you hit that like button if you haven't already, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Click an end screen if you want to continue your binge, and I'll see you guys in the next